Hello. So today we're going to work on the medulla itself. And I've been working on this for a little while to try to figure out why the ball python brain has a kink in the medulla. I think I figured it out. Let's take that the kink means that it's creating more surface area. And that surface area does mean something. That it means that the senses, the nervous system was overtaxed. It was overstressed. It was overworked. And so in the same amount of space, it kinked itself. That's an important subject there to understand. And that's very good to understand too, because it doesn't mean anything else rather than, as far as I know, this is my hypothesis. So if it's an overloading of the system, we see that the ball python buries itself over the rainbow boa, is more arboreal than the ball python. So the rainbow boa senses aren't that tact. Their tax is not that high. Whereas the ball python is burying itself in termite mounds. So we would say that this is caused by taxation on the tactile senses over a rainbow boa. See, the slow worm lizard has a little bit of the kink. Very interesting cerebellum. So this thing should bury itself. Let's find out. So a Jackson chameleon should not bury itself. Not really much of a kink there, is there? Not see the depth of which it kinks shows us a lot. So yeah, the Jackson chameleon should not be kinked as much. And we saw the worm, the slow worm, is not as kinked as the ball python. So we know the rainbow boa. Let's find something else. Brown basilisk, we know, does not. See, no kink in the brown basilisk. See, the brown basilisk has almost no kink in it. Doesn't bury itself. House snake should not bury itself. We don't see a kink in it. Two-toed earless monitor probably buries itself, so we should see a kink. Okay. Kink. European glass lizard buries itself. Kink. It's not as dramatic of a kink. He goes, it wasn't as dramatic of a kink. Bearded dragon. Not much of a kink. Still kind of a kink, but not much of a kink. Yellow-bellied snake lizard has somewhat of a kink. Somewhat. So is this kink found in mammals? This is a brain of a mole. And we actually see this is the medulla here. It's different. This brain is not that different from an actual reptile's brain. You have the forebrain, the optic tantum, cerebellum, medulla. Is this kinked? Yes, it's not kinked in the same way. This is a reptile, should go back and up and out, but it goes down, back, and out. So it's kinked, it's just not kinked in the same way, and this is a species that buries itself. So that gives you an example that a species that burrows. So now we're looking at a fire skink. We know these have a limited burial time. They do come to the surface much like a zebra skink, and then they bury themselves. So the kink isn't as bad as the ball python, but it's still there because their nervous system is still being overtaxed. So it's not about just burying itself. It's about the length of time that the species deals with a overstress of its actual nervous system. So that's the point. That's the hypothesis. It's not about burying. It's about the nervous system. If you were to catch an animal on fire and that animal was able to keep its nervous system, and that nervous system grew with the next generation and everything stayed on fire, you would also see that kink. Even in mammals that bury themselves, you can see the kink. But we've got something else to look at. So the flying dragon has the kink in it. The flying snake does not have the kink like a flying dragon. Why would that be? So the flying dragon is actually stretching its skin, as we can see here. See, the flying snake is flattening out its body as much as it can and actually moving through the air by gliding downwards. It's not actually gliding by stretching its skin. So the sensory tactilization is not. So if we look at squirrels, this is a regular gray squirrel. The medulla comes out, goes back, and comes down. So there is a little bit of, but when we look at the flying squirrel, it's actually flatter and goes all the way down. This is interesting. This, I believe, is due to the fact that it has stretched its actual skin as well. But the way squirrels do, it actually needs that. But if you understand squirrels, then you know that they actually move their body as they land. So that length may actually allow for more maneuverability in that body. That body may be looser, and then you have the fact that it has the actual fur. You do not see the kink in birds because they have feathers and they use an outside force. Just like that's the flying snake uses an outside force, but yet we should see something happen to the actual medulla of the squirrel. Because imagine grabbing underneath your arms and stretching your actual skin out. Much like the flying dragon and the flying squirrel did at one point in time. They were not created that way. They evolved that way. And so that kink, I could put a Jello deal together where we could see that a kink where it has a smaller amount than this. So as you move this, it could break it easier than if it's this big long thing, and you could actually have a little more momentum in it. So the breaking of the spine is not likely to occur in something that buries itself. Something that moves in air more as it lands may actually need more maneuverability. And they may have more maneuverability in the brain to create such a lengthy passageway of neurons, of actual the medulla. So I believe that's why the flying squirrel has a longer one, because we see regular squirrels too tuck themselves away in trees. So what's interesting, okay, if we go back and look at the tanny dragon, the tanny dragon actually moves itself between rocks. It tucks itself away, just like as if it buried itself. So therefore, a species that tucks itself away in rocks is most likely to have the kink as well. And we can actually go back and go, okay, so then we would make the hypothesis that A Eurymastix would have this. So as we can see here, this graph, Eurymastix does have some kink to it from this graph. So I would also hypothesize that the Chuckwalla might. So we might actually also think about scales and how scales behave in these types of animals. And we might be able to make a prediction that different scales correlate to different medullas. That might be something to study later on down the road. Now, so there's always an explanation because it's about the nervous system. It's not actually about them burying themselves. It's not about if they don't bury themselves. It's literally about the burying themselves. And the more they use outside forces, the less likely it is to take a damage of like gliding. But yet if you stretch your skin, you're probably terrorizing your nervous system there in the hopes of flight, which was successful. So we can see that this does have merit to this actual deal. The only real outlier I was able to find was this Cape Dwarf chameleon. Because we didn't see the Jackson chameleon have this type of kink in its medulla. So this is very fascinating that this kink exists in this animal. So at some point in time, this animal's nervous system was overtaxed, most likely. And I don't have any idea why. This is the last remaining outlier that I can come up with. So if you guys have any ideas about this animal, let me know. So this is something we see in mammals, but it kind of kinks the opposite of a reptile does. We can pretty much base the degree of the kink is adjacent to how much nervous systems were affected by how much time, because time is a factor. So we might be able to go back and use that data for other things. This is my hypothesis. If you can come up with a better one, I would love to hear it. But you can pretty much base your dollar to donut that if it buries itself for a long period of time, it will have a kink. So like the Peter Bandit skink will probably have a bigger kink than the fire skink. Fire skink will have about the same as a zebra skink. And a emerald green tree skink will have less kink than a fire skink or a zebra skink. A oscillating skink or a sandfish skink might have the same type of kink that a Peter Bandit skink would have. So this is very fascinating. And it's not about the burial. It is about the nervous system. So thank you guys for coming. Let me know if this made sense, if I need to go back over this again. Just let me know what you think. Let me know where I might be able to take this next. And we do see this in mammals. So you guys have a good night.